Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being. Welcome to the 260th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And today's episode is all about celebrating the 5th birthday, 260 plus one bonus episodes of the Diverse Minds podcast. I can't quite believe it, one episode a week for 5 years. I never really thought I would manage it and get this far, but I want to share with you the things I've learned over the last 5 years of podcasting, give you stats and more tidbits from the podcast. But before we start, have you watched my TEDx talk, where I talk about my experience of navigating a difficult workplace situation? It's about the connection between culture, race, and mental health. And it's something you can watch on your break, as it's just 12 minutes long. The link, of course, is in the show notes, but I'll also give it to you here. It is bit.ly/TEDx Wolves. That's WOLVESLO. And I really hope you enjoy it because it was a labor of love. And if you do like it, please leave a positive comment on YouTube and share and like. And also don't forget to connect with me on LinkedIn and Facebook. Right. So here we are, 5 years of the Diverse Minds podcast and 260 plus one bonus episode. If you missed it, you can download the 200 podcast episode guide, which lists all 200. So it misses out this year's, but all 200 episodes with links to each episode. So you can listen straight away. And they are also coded, color coded and coded by theme. And that's thanks to my VA, Gemma McMillan. And the link is bit.ly/DMPG23. And that's a free resource. So in this episode, I wanted to share with you a recap from last year's worth of episodes and provide an update and also tell you a little bit about what's coming up. So in 2021, I decided that the podcast was going to cover the following things: race equity, mental health, Black and global majority diaspora women, and share my own personal journey. I've also decided, I think a couple of years ago, to create mini-series. So you'll notice each month I have a kind of specific topic around each of the themes each month. And this year we've covered the following topics. So September was writing and mental health, and that's episodes 210 to 213. Then, of course, October is Black History Month, and we covered the theme of saluting our sisters. I had some really great guest interviews. And I also finished off with a piece around workplace behavior change, and those are episodes 214 to 218. And then November was all about parenting, well-being, and race equity, and has some really brilliant guests talking about how they manage their own well-being and talk about racism and anti-racism within their families. And that's episodes 219 to 222. Also want to say my wonderful guest, Dr. Keon West, has just had his book release. So do check that episode out and do check out his new book. Then December, for the tail end of Disability History Month, was disability and inclusion. And I did a specific episode on the barriers that disabled entrepreneurs face from a research project I was involved in. And that's episodes 224 to 225. Then in January, we had the 2 episodes I've not named actually, but I had 2 episodes recapping of the year, and I did an episode on workplace wellbeing trends, my predictions. And I will go back and tell you at the end of this year how right or wrong my predictions were. January then was focused on heart and mind connection. Episodes 227 to 231 had some great guests. Had Dr. Magdalena Bachmeyer, who is brilliant and a real figure in the field around heart and mind connection. And the person I trained with for coaching as collage, using collage as a coaching tool, Andrea Watts, and she's in there as well, talking about how collage can help us connect heart and mind. Those are episodes 227 to 231. Then I had February was all about clarifying and exploring white dominant norms, and that was episodes 232 to 235. Then, of course, we had International Women's Month, and the theme was inspiring inclusion. Did a bit of myth busting in those episodes 236 to 239. Then April was all about decolonization. I did 4 episodes about decolonization and decolonization in different spaces, episodes 240 to 244. And then in May, we looked at psychological safety. That encompasses UK's Mental Health Awareness Week. This was episodes 245 to 248. Then in June, we looked at why the pushback and different themes on what the pushback is around this area of work. And those were episodes 249 to 252. And then interestingly, we had an election called, so July was an election special, and also politics episode, series about politics in the workplace. Can you talk about politics at work? Episodes 253 to 255. And then, of course, we've just finished with South Asian History Month, which runs from mid-July to mid-August. And that was Free to Be Me was the theme. And that's episodes 256 to 2 259, which brings us to today and the 5th birthday. Now, this year, interestingly, I didn't do any podcast awards or judging, so I didn't put myself up for any awards. I didn't judge any awards again this year, partly because I've been juggling the business with working at Hatch Enterprise 2 days a week. So I've also not been able to have as many guests because actually guests take quite a lot of organizing as a result, but focused on sharing my knowledge. And I think the themes have really, really helped with that. So the total downloads since I started in September, well, August was the trailer, August 2019, September 2019, is 49,349, which for an independent podcast that's kind of me and Zavi Ume running it, I think is pretty good. And the top 10 episodes, so you know what they are, is episode number 39, Resilience in Mental Health, then episode 37, Why Bother with Inclusive Language, then the trailer, then episode 107, the book review Culture Map by Erin Meyer, then episode 111, Black Women in Menopause with Nina Kuipers, really happy to see that there, then episode 108, What's the Big Deal with Cultural Appropriation, then episode 8, What is Diwali and How It's Celebrated with Dr. Manish Dayal, then episode 109, 8 Ways to Create Culturally Inclusive Meetings. Then episode 126, The Body Keeps the Score book review by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And then episode 145, Work-Life Balance 1, Teacup Energy Drainers. And if you want to know more about work-life balance, don't forget to check out my course on that subject. The link is in the show notes. Other podcasts I've been on, again, I haven't been on many podcasts this year because that's been sort of strategic just due to my time. But I did go on to Naila Nasser's Communicama podcast, talking about my own experience as a South Asian woman. And Claudia Matura's, I got a second go at being a guest on her podcast, Happiness Reset Campaign, episode 101, Hack 19, Giving Yourself a Break. And that's a really quick, sharp episodes focused on what happiness hack. So that's really, really great. So what is then going to happen going forward? Because it's kind of like, you know, you do 5 years of podcasting and I've absolutely enjoyed it. If you haven't, I've done a birthday episode every single year. And the reason I decided to podcast is because, well, a number of things. It looked really fun and it has been, otherwise I probably wouldn't have stuck with it for 5 years, real passion. And the other thing is that I just found writing blogs quite exhausting. So it was a way of doing things a bit differently. It's been great to connect with podcasters. I would definitely recommend it if you're thinking about, you know, is a podcast for me? Absolutely go for it. But what I would say is that definitely have a plan of when you're going to start, pre-record episodes, get them out there, you know, before you get them out there, and decide how, you know, what you're going to talk about, why you're doing it. And your why might not be, you know, I want 10,000 downloads a week. That's quite difficult to get when you're not a celebrity. It's not impossible, but it's definitely difficult. You know, the subjects we talk about in this podcast, mental health and inclusion, waxes and wanes. People don't always want to talk about race and race equity. And so I've seen the listener numbers, you know, surge 2020, 2021, and then really drop down. But I think the key is to keep going with it. And that's definitely a lesson I've learned. And I'm really pleased I've done it, actually. I'm really pleased. Like it's a big achievement as an individual. And I think that if people have learned from it and they've enjoyed episodes and they've, and I do sometimes hear from listeners, but as always, I'd love to hear from you more around how they have used the tips and used the ideas. It was also a way to be accessible. So if you can't afford to work with me, then it's definitely a way to find out more about my work. So the fact is, you know, if you don't have control over the purse strings or the budget, I try to provide tool tips and support so that anyone can access it. But of course, if you want to work with me and how I could help you with keynotes, workshops, or team coaching sessions, please do email me at Leyla, Leyla, at diverseminds, with an S, all one word, .co.uk. I'd really love to hear from you. So as always, you know, thank you to everyone who's listened, whether you've listened to one episode, 10 episodes, all episodes. I'm so, so grateful. You know, as much as I'd love to have thousands of downloads each week, I have to be realistic about that. And I'm really grateful to all you as engaged followers and supporters who do and can make a difference and support the podcast and contact me on LinkedIn and retweet things or reshare things on LinkedIn. I'm really, really grateful. It's been really great meeting and connecting with different people over the past 5 years, some of whom have become very close friends. And I've also really enjoyed focusing more on solos this year, thinking about the themes. I've actually thought about the themes. I always think about themes carefully, but I think when you do solos, you really have to think about them super carefully because you don't know everything about everything. And whereas if you have guests on, it's quite useful because you can say, I'd really like you to focus on this. So that's been brilliant. And I think it's really focused me in terms of what I want to get out there, the kind of work I want to do, and how I can support you on your mental health and inclusion journey. Again, it's a really great way of getting to know me and decide if my approach is right for you or not. And going forward, we're going to focus on the same 4 themes, which are race, Black global majority women, my personal journey, and mental health. But there is going to be one big change. So you're still going to get the same juicy content, themed months, so you can dip in and access what interests you. But the big change is the podcast will be going to fortnightly instead of weekly. This will give you a chance to catch up on previous episodes you may not have had an opportunity to listen to. And it's also just to give a bit of space. I think that the podcast market is a bit saturated, and it is a bit tricky for people to can find what we do, especially if we're not celebrities. But I will be focusing on resharing previous episodes and content based on themes of the month, and bigging up my guests, maybe people that haven't had enough exposure. So I'd really like to do that. And I think juggling 2 things means that I can keep the quality of the podcast high. And of course, you have 5 years worth of episodes to catch up on. So I think that's really going to be the way forward. So it's going to be fortnightly instead of weekly. That is the big change going forward for year 6. Please, as always, spread the word and share. It's funny, the amount of times I get asked, oh, can I share a link to your podcast? Absolutely. They are publicly available resources. So please share away. And of course, you can get the show notes as well and directly on my website. So if that's a preferred way to view things, you can also look at it there and on all the major podcasting platforms. So I really hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and of course the show over the last 5 years, or for however long you've been listening for. If you have, please write me a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. I love to hear from listeners. I love to hear from you as listeners. Have you got any ideas of what you want me to cover? Let me know. And to make this super easy, I've created a place online where you can leave me a voice note anonymously or with your name if you'd like to, called SpeakPipe. The link is in the show notes, but I'll also give it to you here. It is bit.ly/spkpdm. And the resources for this episode are the podcast resource guide, the first 200 episodes. So please do check that out, bit.ly/DMPG23. Link is in the show notes. The Happiness Challenge website. And don't forget, it's episode 101, Hack 19, Giving Yourself a Break. And the link to Naila Nasser's Communicama that I had a chance to be a part of. So listeners, I hope you will take care. I hope I will hear from you, because I really do love that. And let's see what the 6th year brings. I will be sharing previous episodes for September, Self-Care September, so do keep an eye out for that. I'll also be sharing some information for International Suicide Awareness Day, which is the 10th of September. And then we're going to have some fresh new content. I'm actually just going to take a week off to think about that. Normally I'd tell you because I'd have it planned, but I want to have a little think about what's going to be most impactful on a fortnightly basis. But if there is something you really would like me to talk about, please get in touch, and I'd love to support you with that. Okay, well, please take care, and hopefully you will tune into the next episode, which will be week beginning of September. And take care. Have a wonderful bank holiday weekend for those in the UK, and international listeners, please do let me know as well. And I'm as always, I'm really, really grateful, and I will catch you in the next episode. Thank you so much for being with me over these last 5 years, and let's see what happens.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.